Click, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. James chapter 3. Now, I was planning on getting through 1 through 12 last week, but we got through James chapter 3, verse 1, because we're like that. That's what we do. So, what do you guys think about words and speech? So, are words important? Are picking your words important? Can they be good? Can they be bad? So, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about words. And the way that the Bible expresses this concept is the tongue or the mouth. If you cut off somebody's tongue, generally speaking, they cannot talk. They can make noises, but they can no longer communicate with their mouth. So the importance of the tongue is that it's the center of communication. Every word that we speak, every idea that we communicate goes past the tongue. So as we read the text, it's really going to talk about the tongue and the power of the tongue. Now, we know that the tongue itself has no power, so we're talking about speech and expression and communication. We use in our culture very specific words like a speech as violence or hate speech. So people have taken speech in our culture and they've elevated it to the point of physical harm to other people. Biblically, it's not taken to that height, but it is exemplified to its extreme. Speech is not equal to murder. If I say, curse you and die, that's not equal to me stabbing them with the knife, right? But our culture has taken it to that place. And they're saying that speech is violence and that hate speech is punishable by whatever kind of standards, okay? This is where you get into microaggressions and safe spaces and all of this nonsense. Wasn't planning to get into all of that, but I wanted to clarify, as we discuss the power of the tongue, the Bible is very clear that it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. And it's going to give us some examples. He's going to walk us through the implications and the importance of it. Okay? So James chapter 3, verse 1, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. What does teaching require? Speaking. It's communication. Everything that I am communicating to you, you can read for yourself, but I am generating the ideas from my mind and then trying to communicate it to you. A teacher is just trying to simplify ideas and make it easier. So James is saying not many should become teachers. And then he explains why. Verse 2, for we all stumble in many ways. What does that mean to stumble? Sin. We all sin in many ways. Now, not many of us should be teachers because we have stricter judgment. Now, all of us sin in many ways. And if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. What is James saying there? If I could be a perfect human being, what is the number one thing I must do? No stumbling and no sinning in what? In speech. See, we all sin in many ways, but particularly we sin with our words. And if you would be a perfect person, you would have perfect speech. Now, the best part about teaching is I say so many things that people get offended at. Most of the time, it's not even when I'm teaching, it's when I'm not teaching, they still get offended. And they come to me and they rebuke me and they say, I don't appreciate what you said, right? The most notable, and I took note of this one, is saying the word retard in a derogatory way, right? That's culturally insensitive, is no longer acceptable. So, they came to me and said, hey, I don't appreciate you using that. Okay, so I stumbled in my speech and I repented and changed that. So we all stumble in many ways, But if we can control our speech, we could be perfect. That's the implications. The number one thing that makes us imperfect is our speech. Verse 3, if we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. What is the tongue compared to here? There's examples of a positive manner of what the tongue can be. This is all positive. How do you steer a horse? So if I grab its head and I pull its head on the reins, so we put something in its mouth. So have you ever seen a Clydesdale horse? They're like 12 feet tall and like 15 feet long, and they do the work of 15 horses. They are massive. Do you know the largest bit designed for horses is 6 inches? So you can take a 2,000-pound horse and take a 6-inch piece of metal, and you can control that horse. You can move it where you desire. That is the power of what? The bit. The bit has the power to control a very large and powerful creature like a horse. Now you have a ship. You ever see those tanker ships? Like they're just massive and they're huge. They're practical like cities on water, or like a cruise ship is a good one. You can put 10,000 people out there and have an entire city. How do you control that ship? With a rudder. Now rudders can be anywhere from 1/100th the size of the ship or 1/10,000th the size of the ship. So you have this massive ship and you have this little tiny piece of metal, and that piece of metal is so powerful it can steer that ship. And that's what James is explaining. Our tongues are the source of control. If you cannot discipline your mouth and your tongue is out of control, what about the rest of your body? If the smallest thing in your possession is not being controlled, can you control the large things? That's why if you can control your tongue, you can control your whole body. And that's what he says. Verse 3, if we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Look at the ships. They are so large, driven by winds, guided by a very small rudder. Verse 5, so also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. It has the potential to do great things. Verse 5b, I don't know why they did this, but they did. They cut the verse in half. How great a forest is set on fire by such a small spark. A forest fire can be started by what? A small spark, a small ember, a lingering fire, fire pit, lightning, little cigarette. Now, we talked about the positive nature. Like, think about the power of the words that we speak and the potential to guide and lead, as we've been talking about, particularly to control ourselves. If you can control such a small thing, you can control your whole body. Now, the negative. When that spark is not tamed, when that spark is not contained or controlled, what happens? You burn down the whole world. And James is really going to highlight the corruption that is in the tongue. And he's going to talk about the root and the cause of where our words come from. So he says in verse 6, the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by what? Hell. His description, he says that the tongue is a world of unrighteousness. That is, the totality of sin is rooted in the tongue. That's a strange thing to think about. Where does adultery come from? So it originates in the heart, but adultery can't happen without what? Flirtatious words. Where does murder come from? It starts in the heart, but in your plotting or your argumentation or whatever the confrontation is, you will verbalize that far before you act out on it, right? Especially in like passionate murder, right? There's like the psychotic murder where like people just do crazy things. That's a little different. But all the world of the tongue is unrighteousness. The totality of the tongue is sinful. And then he goes on and he says it stains the entire body, right? It doesn't stain the soul. It's not the inner person that it stains. It stains the outer person. It is a character flaw that others see, and it marks you as corrupt. What we're gonna start seeing is that the marks of a genuine Christian is that their tongue is under control. This small tool soils and defiles its owner. Then he goes on and he says, it is setting on fire the entire course of life. So what this means is that from birth, our words have led to corruption. From our entire life, since birth, everything that we've said has been corrupting. That could be lies, deceit, pride, arrogance. It can be slander, gossip, anger, hating people, hating one another, mistreating people, putting people down. That starts at this age. And then he goes on and he says it is set on fire by hell. I tried to look this one up and get the base of it. The word for hell is Gehenna, and it was the trash heap in Jesus' day. Like we have Republic and they come by and they pick everything up and take it to the trash for us. They didn't have that. What they had was like a valley. It was a pit, and everybody would walk over and just throw their stuff in it. And you know what they did? They set it on fire. Because that's what most people have done throughout history with their trash, is they've burned it. So when it talks about being set on fire by hell, it carries the idea of that trash heap, the corruption, the putrid soiling of bones and animal skins and pot and clay and like wool. It's not the trash we have nowadays, all the plastic and all that stuff. It's more earthy things, but this is a place of decay and corruption, and is set on fire by that corruption. It is the sin nature that is rooted in our being, in our natural corruption through birth, that our tongue is fed. If we were to get to heaven and keep our nature, we would have the same problem in heaven. So God says, I will give you a new nature, and I will deliver you from this corrupted nature and give you a pure and holy nature created after the image of God, right? In perfection. So when we get to heaven, we won't have that corruption. So you know what our language is going to be? Perfect. Are we still going to have language in heaven? You better believe it. It's hard to praise Jesus without language, without speaking, right? And to discuss one another, be like, hey, dude, do you remember that one Bible study at James? I'm so glad I don't have to worry about this thing anymore. This wicked tongue. Verse 7, for every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind. What is he saying? Have you guys ever been to SeaWorld? Isn't it amazing? I've never been there, but isn't it amazing to see whales be obedient to human beings? Like one of the largest creatures on the planet, and they can get them to jump through a hoop. God has given dominion to man over all the earth. And James is saying that every bird and beast and critter is under the dominion of man and has been brought into subjection and under the control of mankind. We talk about like lion tamers. There's no creature. Remember Steve Irwin, Crocodile Down Under, Crocodile Hunter? That dude's crazy. I wouldn't wrestle a crocodile, but he has no problem. He had dominion over those creatures. But this is what James is going to get to. We can control everything. But Verse 8, no human being can tame the tongue. No human being can tame the tongue. Can we recognize the battle? Can we recognize the struggle? Our words are difficult to control. And Ruth and I found this out. We do cold plunges. And so we were in there just suffering. And she asked the question. She says, why is it when I get in here that curse words are just right on the edge of my tongue? Why is it that when I am put under pressure that the temptation to say things that I otherwise never would say is now available and I have to suppress them? I have to be very mindful of my words. And I don't know about you guys, but at work, I get frustrated on a daily basis, like all the time. That's part of life. That's the thorns of employment. Why is it when we get frustrated, curse words are right on the edge of it's just right there. Now, as a person, I don't curse, and I have not cursed for over a decade, but somehow it still lingers in my heart. And I get pushed, and then I'm like, nope, not doing it. It is extraordinarily difficult to tame the tongue. Now remember, if we can tame the tongue, what will we be? Perfect, right? If we would set our sights on this end, control our thoughts and intentions and communications, we will control our whole body. So he says it's extraordinarily difficult to tame the tongue. Verse 8, it is a restless evil full of deadly poison. A restless evil is an unrestrainable evil nature, and it is the bringer of poisonous death. It is a snake hiding in your mouth. It is a corrupted being waiting to strike. James is painting such a vivid picture for us in our struggles. It is poisonous and it is unrestrainable evil. That's why we struggle so much with our words. But it is very important to do so. We can't, the worst thing I hear, it bugs the daylights out of me, is when people say, I'm only human. I can't stand it when people say that. You know why? It's because it's an excuse. It's an excuse to do the inexcusable. Oh, I did this thing. I committed this sin. Why? I'm only human. I'm flawed. No, all sin is inexcusable, and you actively made a choice to participate in that sin. Don't try to downplay it and excuse yourself by claiming that it's only in your nature. If that were the case, then all laws would be excusable because we are only flawed creatures. We can't live by the law. I shot that guy because he made me angry. I'm only human. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't fly in a court of law. And I promise you, that argument will not fly in the courts of heaven. So when it comes to our words, James is going to explain it to us. And he's going to say, look, it's very important to recognize what is in your heart. Because a genuine Christian, a real disciple of Jesus, cannot have a bad mouth. So this is what he says. Verse 9, with it, that's our tongue, we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. So I come over here and I say, God, bless you. You are so amazing. I praise you. I worship you. You are my creator and I love you. Thank you for the redemption of my soul. Thank you for saving me, oh God. And then I turn around and I say, look at this stupid idiot. What a moron. I can't believe that guy. You know what? I wish yada, 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 yada. And James is saying this. That is not okay. We cannot call God our Father and then turn around and treat human beings negatively with our words. Why? Why can we not mistreat human beings with our tongue? Because they are the image of the Father that we claim to bless. We, all of us, human beings, are created in His image. So when I curse you, what am I cursing? God's image. That's like saying, I love my wife, but when I go to shoot in the desert, I put a poster of her face up there. That's what we do to human beings. You see that poster over there? That's God's image. And you're like, yeah, I just shoot at it all the time. I curse my neighbor and I talk trash about people. My words blaspheme the image of God when I place those words on human beings. And James is saying there is no way that that is acceptable. He says, my brothers, these things ought not to be so. This is not okay. Verse 11, does a spring pour forth the same opening, both fresh and salt water? When you turn on your faucet at home, do you get salt water? Why not? Because you need fresh water. So you would look at the faucet that has salt water and fresh water, and you know what you would say? That's broken. Is there rust in your water? Nope. If there is, it's what? It's broken. Like, that's not right. That's not supposed to happen. If I go to a spring, it's supposed to supply fresh water. Can it bring forth both? No. Verse 12, can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives? Remember back to the giraffe? A giraffe is going to look like a giraffe. A dog is going to bark like a dog. A cat's going to meow like a cat. A fig tree, is it going to bring forth olives? Why not? It's not in its nature. Let me put it another way. Modern language. Genetically, it's DNA. It's physically impossible. Imposible. Or a grapevine produce figs. Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water. Now he flips it. Now, if I go to the ocean and I get real thirsty, I don't know about you guys, but being around that much water, you get thirsty, okay? Now, if I go to the ocean and I dip my hand in there and I take a sip, what am I gonna get? Why? No, I want some fresh water. So here's what I'll do. I'll bring a 5-gallon bucket, I'll go to the ocean, and I'll dump the 5-gallon bucket in there of fresh water, and then I'll drink it. What am I gonna get? What? No. You mean to tell me that I can't get fresh water out of salt water? What is James's point? If you say, I am a freshwater stream, right? Because we've been cleansed by Jesus, we've been born again, new creation. I am a freshwater stream. And every time I open my mouth, you know what you get? Salt water. What am I? I'm not a fresh pond of water. I'm not the thing I claim to be. If every time I go to that tree, it's olives, and on the sign it says fig tree, that's not real. That's not genuine. So James is saying our words will betray us as a genuine believer and follower in Jesus, or that we're not, because our language shows who we are. And remember, the tongue is powerful. If we can tame our speech, we can be the person we want to be. If you can't control your speech, you won't control every aspect of your life. You will lose control of the things that matter because you've lost control of the one thing that controls them. I think James is pretty clear, but I want to go through some texts in the Bible like we did for a teacher and just kind of highlight what Jesus says, what some of the apostles say about language as well. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 12. Now, James pulls almost verbatim from what Jesus says. So he says, make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. What does that mean? What is Jesus saying? But he uses he gives an option. He's like, you have a choice here. Make it a good tree or make it a bad tree. Like, you got to pick a side. You can't have both. You can't say you're a good tree and have bad fruit. If you have bad fruit, at least admit you're a bad tree. And that, it just goes back to being genuine, right? We have a friend, we were talking and they were like, hey, I don't want to come to Bible study because I'm not a Christian and everybody else who is there is a Christian. And I feel like I would just be putting on a show, like I wouldn't be genuine. And we had that conversation, but at least they're willing to say, I know where I stand and I don't agree with you guys. So me showing up, I feel like it's being a hypocrite is where they're at. It's like, hey, well, at least we're having the conversation and you're honest about where you are. But that feeling of hypocrisy that says, I act one way and I'm a different way, right? I say that I'm this thing, but I'm not really living up to the standard. That's a hard place to be. But the best part about it is you get to make that choice. Be warm or be cold. That's okay. Pick one. You don't get to be a fence walker. He really nails that down. Verse 34, this is pretty sharp here. Talk about sharp words. Jesus calls people snakes. He says, you brood of vipers, right? Now, in our culture, that would probably be pretty aggressive, almost close to hate speech. You're a son of the devil. And people get pretty upset over that. Oh, Jesus said that too. That's right. So Jesus isn't afraid. The Bible doesn't cast out aggressive or confrontational speech. It's that speech needs to have a purpose. Speech needs to be good. And sometimes pain can be good. Like looking at somebody and saying, you're a dirtbag. You're a scoundrel. The way you're living life is bad, right? But the difference is you have to say it to them, not about them. So Jesus says, 34, you brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good. And the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Now, he doesn't say good words, and he doesn't say bad words. He says careless words. He says useless words. He says words that did not have the intended results. When you're speaking and saying things that are not for the purpose of edifying, building up, encouraging, and giving growth in Christ, those words are worthless. You know what most curse words are? They're filler words. They don't actually do anything. Well, but you can use a curse word with emphasis, and at least there's a purpose to it. But have you ever had conversations with people and all they do is every other word, they're dropping a 4-letter word? Like, what are you even talking about? Why don't you just use like the 5 words that you needed in that sentence instead of saying 15 words and 10 of them were unnecessary? I go to Ruth. Ruth is my employee. And I say, Ruth, I told you need to get this amount of work done and you didn't get it done. I told you need to be here on time and you're not on time. You're a bad employee. You're not beneficial to the company. I'm this close to firing you. We'd be like, oh, that's tearing them down. No, that's a shot across the bow. That is a warning. That is actually grace to say, hey, you know what? You're messing up. You need to do better. This is where you are messing up. And this is where you can be more successful. Ruth, these are your flaws. If you start coming in on time and you start getting this work done and you start working a little harder, you'll be doing good. What is the intended result that you're going for? I have an employee and he may not be the person he wants to be. He wants to live in this world up here and he might not be capable of it. And I have to have that conversation with him. Like, hey man, this isn't for everybody. You might want it, but you might not have the skills. You're bad at your job. That's a tough conversation. And maybe that's not for building up in the technical terms of the world where everything is like a pillow fight. Like, no, we get into boxing rings because when you get punched in the mouth, you learn something. When you get hit with a pillow, you don't think it's significant. You don't think it's important. So hurtful, harmful, difficult language and conversation can be very, very good for people. So I've been confronted multiple times and it's always been good for me. Let's read Colossians chapter 3, verse 5. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you. Okay? So this is a very overarching theme. It is time to die to your earthly self. That means that who you were without Jesus needs to die, needs to be crucified, nailed to a cross, hung up in the air, suffocated, murdered, and put in the ground. No resurrection to the earthly self, okay? Put to death everything that is in you that is earthly, not heavenly, not spiritual, but sinful and fleshly. So he says, he gives a big long list, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. Why is the wrath of God coming? Judgment against what? our earthly selves. God's wrath is coming for sin, the sin that we used to live in. Either he comes and he kills you with his wrath, or you kill yourself, not literally, but you put to death those things, or he will do it when he comes in vengeance, okay? So keep in mind, these are the things that God will punish. And then he goes on, verse 7, in these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away. Anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. It means foul or improper language. Things that are out of place. Just take it like this. Anything that a 10-year-old kid, like if you were a parent and you said, hey, I don't want my 10-year-old using this language, that's the language we don't use. It is culturally inappropriate. It is foul. It is improper. We all used to live there. We used to participate that, just like in wrath and anger. You remember when you weren't a Christian and you would get together with all your friends and you would sit there and just talk trash about cops and you'd talk trash about those people and that stupid teacher over there and you'd yada, 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 yada. No, you know what you do now? You put that all away. You don't get angry. You're not full of wrath. You're not envious and slanderous and gossipy. You put that away with all obscene language. And then he goes on talking about lying to one another and stuff like that. Any questions? Chapter 4, verse 6, he says, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each other. What is seasoning for? Flavor. So I found out, right? Johnny's a chef, so he probably knows best. I don't know how to cook, but I've been winging it. I'm pretty good at that. I found out if I use a lot of like cumin, I'm like, oh man, cumin's so good. I'm just gonna put a ton of cumin in there. That's all I need. It ruins the dish. Any seasoning that I just dump in there, except for salt. You can oversalt things, but salt's pretty good. Okay, it's hard to oversalt sometimes. Anyways, if you use too much of one seasoning, it can become overbearing in that dish and it can ruin it. So I found out what you do is you take a little bit of like half a dozen. You get some cumin, you get some pepper, and you get some pepper flakes, and you get this and a little bit of this. All of that, thank you. Those are the key, actually. I think they're called the Holy Trinity, aren't they, in like the chef world? Anyways, you just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a little bit of this. It's a sprinkling of flavor, and then you get a magnificent dish. You don't overpower it. We are to speak in such a way that is gracious and seasoned with salt so that we know how to communicate with one another. Being gracious means understanding the state of mind the other person is in. God is gracious to us. You know why? Because when I'm heartbroken, he binds me up and he holds me. And he's gracious to me when I'm proud and arrogant and he smacks me in the back of the head. He's still gracious because he responds to me with what I need. Sometimes I need a little kick in the rump. Sometimes I need a little hug. Being gracious means knowing the state of mind that the people are around you and communicating to them in such a way that it is flavorful. A little dab here, a little dab there. Some people don't like to talk about Jesus all the time. That's okay. I love to talk about Jesus. You come up to me and you want to talk about Jesus, we'll talk about Jesus all day. You come up to me and you don't want to talk about Jesus, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. I don't care. I'm here to season your life. And that day will come when you're going to be like, hey, you know what? I need a friend who knows Jesus, and you're the guy. Man, I've been waiting in the wings. Let's have this conversation. Okay, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such is good for building up as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. This just puts it all together. Now, this word for corrupting talk is putrid. You remember how we talked about how the tongue is set on fire by hell, or Gehenna, which is like the trash dump? That's what this is. Have no putrid, sour, stinky, out of place, disgusting, corrupted language. All of that. Get rid of that type of language and talking, but only as meets the occasion. If somebody has lost a loved one and they're mourning, what kind of language are you going to use with them? Very particular language. If somebody's just had a baby and they're excited, oh, God has given us life and this is precious little baby, what kind of language are you going to use? Particular language. Know who you're talking to and how to talk to them. It's a skill, but also take all that corrupting stuff, just ball it up and get rid of it. I don't know what it is. Going on a diatribe here. I don't know what it is. There are certain people that are just terrible to talk to. Because you can have a good conversation and you're talking and you're jiving for about 30, 40 seconds and they're like, oh yeah, let's take this bus over in the gutter. I'm like, okay, I'm leaving. I'm like, goodbye. These are strangers, right? They're acquaintances, like coworkers and stuff. I'm like, if you guys want to talk like that, that's cool. You do you. I'm going to leave. I don't got to put up with this. Best part about being the boss too, I get to be like, hey, get back to work. There's some people that I just won't have a conversation with because they always take it in this direction. It's unnecessary. It's putrid. It's sour. It's trash, man. Don't be feeding me trash. Do you want trash in your ears? Like, take that trash can over there, shove some of that into your ear. Is that fun? No. Leave that stuff out. I don't want none of that. This is a good one for you guys. People walk up to me and they're like, great, you want to hear something funny? You know what my first response is? I don't know. Do I? Like, legitimately, do I want to hear this? Because they get to know me. They know my character. And they'll be like, yeah, probably not. Or they'll be like, yeah, listen. I'll be like, whoa, I'm going to stop you there, dude. I don't want to hear this. Yeah. And then they try it out on me and I'm like, dude, I really didn't want to hear that. So that's putting boundaries, right? And then they stop talking to me. It's great. Chapter 5, verse 4. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor crude joking, which is what? Out of place. But instead, let there be thanksgiving. The word for foolish is kind of funny. It literally means moronic, stupid. Don't let there be stupid language. It carries the idea of being ugly. Ugly, moronic, idiotic things. Just stop talking about it. And then he says, instead, let there be thanksgiving. What emotion goes along with thanksgiving? Gratitude. It's interesting that we are told to replace idiotic, improper, putrid language with thanksgiving and saltiness. Because when you start to pay attention to the positive side of life, when everybody else is complaining about, oh, this stupid government, Biden, to be fair, that's me a lot, but, oh, this stupid stuff over here, and then you're like, you know what? I'm thankful. You guys all might be complaining, but I'm thankful. And you know what you can always be thankful for? Even if your left leg gets chopped off and you lose your family and everything is gone, do you know what you can still be thankful for when you lose absolutely everything? Your salvation. That you've been delivered from the wrath to come and you are going to stand before Him righteous and pure and clean and holy. And you know Him and you walk with Him and He is your Savior. That is something that we can always be grateful for. You know when you go down to pray and you don't know what to pray? Just say thank you. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for giving your life for me. I didn't deserve it, but you still love me. Gratitude goes a very long way. One more, Psalm 19, verse 14. Psalm 19:14. This is a prayer. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. That's what we desire, that our words would be acceptable. Could you imagine going and standing before God and speaking the way that we normally speak? No way. They are unacceptable to Him. So we want to live as though He is standing right next to us. You know why? Because He is. We want our words to be acceptable to Him, right? Just like when you're a little kid, and yes, you curse when you're around your friends, but when you get home and you're around your parents, you want your words to be acceptable to them. And so you change your actions whenever they're around. Well, God, Jesus, they're always here. I'm going to jump through the application real quick. Little words can be positive and they can be negative. And if you control your mouth, you'll be perfect. Yay! Next week, we will talk about being born from above and what comes from above.